Right. So let me get rid of. Okay, so what we've got here is a foundation paper calculator paper for GCSE. Right, so you've got a rectangle there and it asks you to work out the perimeter. So if you remember, the perimeter is all the way around the edge. So you're going to do your 7 plus your 5 plus your 7 plus your 5. So you've got 7 plus 5 plus 7 plus 5, which is 24. Then it's asking you to circle the number greater than minus 0.9. So remember, when you're bigger than minus 0.9, it's a smaller negative because you want to be less negative. So that's going to give you minus 0.89. Right, so scroll up. We've now got 2 questions. We've got to simplify 8x minus 3 plus 6x. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine the x's. So when we combine the 8 and the 6x together, we get 8 plus 6x, which is 14x. And straight away, you can see there's only one option with the 14x. You double check the minus 3, and that makes sense. Then you've got, what is the angle of turn clockwise from southwest? So never eat shredded wheat. I don't know how you remember it. And you want to go from southwest to east. So you want to end up from southwest to east. So this is your southwest, and you want to go clockwise, so the way the clock goes, so you're going this way. And so if we go this much, it's 45 degrees. Then we're going to add 90 to it. And then we're going to add another 90 to it. Remember, we've got a calculator, so we can put it all in the calculator and we'll get 225. Right. So our next lot of questions, we've got Lucy works 37 hours per week. Her weekly wage is £303.40. She receives a pay increase of £25 per hour. Work out her new weekly wage. So first of all, you want to work out how many hours, how much she gets paid per hour. So she's got 37 hours, she gets 303.4. So if you were to do 303.4 divided by 37, you'll get £8.20. And that tells you how much she gets for each hour. Now, for every hour, it's now being increased by 25p. So now she gets paid £8.45 for each hour. And you want to do £8.45 times 37. And remember, you've got a calculator, so you get 312.65. 312. And remember, even if it didn't come out exactly to 2 decimal places, that's what you do with money, because that's how you think about money. Right. Let's have a look at the next question. So we've got complete the bank statement. So you've got a starting balance, then you've got a debit of car repairs. Now a debit means the amount's going down. If you're paying something, so you've got car repairs, which you're paying for something, so the amount has to decrease. So in your calculator, you're doing 1140.79 minus 256. And that gives you 884.79. And then you're minusing 87.31. So you get 797.48. And then you're getting your salary, and it's a credit. Now, even if you aren't sure whether credit was adding or subtracting, logically you get money into your bank account if it's your salary. So you add the amount then, and you get a balance of 2867.23. So write down the meaning of debit. So this is what I just said. So your debit is money coming out of your bank. So your meaning would be money that comes out of your bank account. Okay, question 7. So we move on to question 7. We've got a line and it's telling us to find a midpoint. Now, if we want the midpoint of any two numbers, what we do is we add them up and we divide by 2. When it's a coordinate, we add up the x's and divide it by 2, and we add up the y's and divide it by 2. So to find the midpoint of 0 and 6, we add them up. So 0 plus 6, and then we divide it by 2, which would give you 3. And then for the y coordinate, you've got 2 plus 5 divided by 2. Remember, you've got a calculator as well. You shouldn't need to do it for this, but if you do, it's not a problem. 2 plus 5 is 7. 7 over 2 is 3.5. So whenever you want to find the midpoint, you add up the two numbers and you divide it by 2. Right, so question 8. Now it's telling you C is another point on AB. C is closer to B than to A, and the coordinates of C are whole numbers. So let's have a look. So we're saying C is another point on this line, and everything's a whole number. So if we go along this line, we've got one whole number here, which is 2, 3, but that's closer to A, not to B. And then we've got another lot of whole numbers here, which is 4, 4, which is closer to B. So the answer to 7B must be 4, 4. And then it tells us, on the grid, draw a point, a line from 0, 0, that is parallel to AB, so it's going to have the same slope as AB, and is 2/3 as long. So if we have a look at this line, how long is it? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 along, and 3 up. 2/3 of that would mean that it's going to be 4 along and 2 up. So it's going to be 4 along and 2 up. So it's going to go till this point here, and this is the line which we would have there. And the answer to part B, like we said, was 4, 4, because we were looking for whole numbers. Okay, question 8. Lena is at the gym. She will use these pieces of equipment. She will use the rowing machine first, and you're going to list all the possible orders in which she could use the 4 pieces. So the bit of information that we need to read there is, and they've made it bold for us, is the rowing machine first. Okay, so if she used the rowing machine first, she could use the treadmill second, then the stepper, then the bike. And you've got to think of all your possibilities. So what I would do is, well, the rowing machine is fixed, but then I would fix the treadmill. So if I fix that, these two can then swap around. Okay, so now I've got the rowing machine. I'd fix something else as second. So let's fix the bike as second. And then what have we got left? We've got the treadmill and the stepper. And again, we could fix the bike as second and swap those two around. Now let's fix the stepper as second. And then we'd have the bike and the treadmill. And then that will give you all the possible solutions. You shouldn't be able to think of any other ways that you can do that. But if you try find a systematic way of doing it, it won't take you too long to think about it. Okay. So now let's have a look at part B. So part B says the table shows how long Lena spends on each piece of equipment. She starts on the rowing machine at 1:50 p.m. She has a break for 4 minutes between machines. What time does she finish on her last piece of equipment? So if she started on the rowing machine at 1:50 p.m. and she spends 15 minutes, what time is she done? Well, she'll be done, if you spend 10 minutes, it takes you to 2 p.m. and then you've got an extra 5 minutes, so you're at 2:05 p.m. And then we've said she has a 4-minute break, sorry. So if we take a 4-minute break, so plus her 4 minutes, she's now going to start on the stepper at 2:09 p.m. And we're adding 13 minutes. So remember, this is a calculator paper. You could do 9 plus 13 if you were being blank and wanted to check your mental arithmetic in your calculator, and you get 22. So that takes you to 2:22 p.m. And then she has another 4 minutes. So she starts on the treadmill at 2:26 p.m. and she spends 35 minutes on it. And when you do 26 plus 35, you get just over 60, you get 61. So that means it must be the whole till the hour, so till 3 plus 1, so 3:01 p.m. And then she's got another 4 minutes. So now she's at 3:05 p.m. and she spends 1 hour, 30 minutes. So 1 hour takes you to 4:05 p.m. Add another 30 minutes. She's now at 4:35 p.m. And that's how I would lay the working out. Now, if you wanted to change it into a 24-hour clock and have 13:50 plus 30 plus 15 and 14:05, that would be perfectly fine as well as working. Right. So our next question, we have some information on a bar chart. So if I try and make this smaller so you can see the whole page, and you're told to complete the chart. So if you have a look how they've done it, it's a bar chart, but with like 2 different colors. There's like a dark, so black and grayed. So I'd probably represent that like by shading it in slightly lighter. So on Tuesday, you're going to go up till 8 in the dark color. So you'd go till 8 and you'd color that in totally. And then you've got 6 texts. So on top of that, you've got 6. So that's going to be 2, 4, 6. And you'd shade that in lighter. I'm just going to do it with. So that takes you to 14. On Wednesday, you've got 10 emails. So you've got 10 here. And then you've got an additional 3. So that's going to be halfway over here. On Thursday, you've got 6 and 6. So we've got 6 here. And then the other bit would be till 12, where you just cross it like that. On Friday, you're going up till 12. Colouring that in. And then you've got an extra 4. So like that. My very bad drawings, but you'd be able to do it a lot neater. And just while we're on this page, I'm going to tell you what the next question is, which says, in total, what fraction of the messages were emails? So they're trying to say, what is the total number of messages and what's the total number of emails? So in your calculator again, or in your head, you've got 12 plus 8 plus 10 plus 6 plus 12. And the total here is 48. Now the total number of texts, 5 plus 6 plus 3 plus 6 plus 4, and that gives you 24. So you've got 48 as the total number of emails, and you've got 24 as the total number of texts. So I'm just doing that on this page. So when we go over the page, you can see where I use those numbers. So it says, in total, what fraction of the messages were emails? So we said what we worked out was the total emails was 48. The total texts, by just adding them up, was 24. If we were to add these 2 up, we get 72. So if we're asking for a fraction, we know we're going over something. and we're always over the total. And we want to know how many of those were emails, were 48. And if this was a non-calculator paper, if it's a calculator, you put 48 and 72, 48 over 72 in your calculator, and it will cancel it down for you. But if it was non-calculator, you're going to yourself, okay, what can I do? So we can half it. So we could half the top and we'd get 24. And if we had to half 72 without your calculator, so you're going to say half of 70 is 35 and half of 2 is 1. When you add them up, you get 36. And you could keep halving. So you get 12 and 18. You get 6 and 9. And at this point, you'd go, okay, it doesn't go into 2, does it go into 3? Yes, and you'd get 2 and 3. Now, in your calculator, if you put 48 over 72, it'd give you 2/3 straight away. Right, then the next bit tells you each side of a square is made 3 times as long. What happens to the perimeter? So if you're not sure, draw yourself something. So if you say, okay, if I start off with a square that's just 1 by 1, and I'm making each bit 3 times as long, so the perimeter here is going to be 4. Now, if this is 3 times as long, this is going to be 3, and this is going to be 3, because it's a square. So I'm going to get 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. And I'm going to get, what am I going to get? So I'm going to get 12. How do I go from 4 to 12? I times by 3. So the perimeter must times by 3. Now, the other way to think about it is it's a length. The length always changes by the same amount. A perimeter is just lots of lengths all added up. If it was an area, it would be multiplied by the factor squared. If it was a volume, it would be the factor cubed. So for example, if each side of the square was 3 times as long, what would happen to the area? The area would be 3 squared bigger. So it'd be 9 times bigger. And if it was a volume, it'd be 3 cubed bigger. But because it's a perimeter, which represents by a length, it's just multiplied by 3. Okay, so question 11. So here is a list of ingredients needed to make 6 pancakes. But we don't want 6 pancakes, we want 9 pancakes. So we're going to imagine that, well, we have a calculator, but if we've got 6, if I divide all of these by 2, that's going to tell me how many I need to make 3 pancakes. So if I divide everything by 2, that's going to give me 3 pancakes. That's pancakes. So if I divide 120 by 2, I'm going to get 60. 2 by 2, I'm going to get 1. And 200 and then I've got 210 by 2 to give me 105. But I don't want 3, I want 9. So I'm going to take all these numbers and I'm going to multiply them by 3. So I'm going to get 60 times 3. So 6 times 3 is 18. Add a 0, 180. 1 times 3 is 3. And I'm going to put the grams in just in case they're going to be fussy about my units. And I've got 105 times 3. So 100 times 3 is 300. 5 times 3 is 15. So I get 315. And that's milliliters. And then it says convert 210 milliliters to fluid ounces. 1 fluid ounce is 28.4 milliliters. Okay, so all you've got to say to yourself is I have milliliters and I want fluid ounces. Which one will be bigger? Now you can see from this conversion that you have more milliliters than you do fluid ounces. So in order to make the milliliters smaller, I have to divide by something. If it was the other way around, I'd be multiplying. So that's your sense check to yourself. So you're going to take the 210, divide it by 28.4, and your calculator will give you 7.3. Oh, you just type this wrong into my calculator. 7.394 ... You want 1 decimal place. So you want one number after the decimal place. So you look at the number after it, which in this case is a 9, which is 5 and bigger. So you round it up. So your final answer is 7.4 fluid ounces. And I think it gives you like a box to write that in underneath. Okay. So here we've got to reflect shape A in the x-axis. Now, what's the x-axis? So you can see an X here. You can see an X here. So this whole line is an x-axis. So it's as if you're putting a mirror on this line. If you were to put the mirror on this line, this would reflect here. You're not changing the size of anything. And so your diagram would do this. If it asked you to reflect in a certain shape, yes, this is for GCSE, it's a foundation GCSE paper. So if it asked you to reflect in a certain line, you were allowed tracing paper, you could fold over the tracing paper and write over it. Okay, question 13. A charity sends an appeal letter to 3,000 people. The letter asks for a donation of money. Here is some information about the last appeal letter the charity sent out. Half of the people who were sent the letter made a donation. The average donation was £8.60, and a third filled in a tax form, which then added 25%. So let's try use this information. We're going to break it down and go slowly. We've got 3,000 people. And we know that half of them, based on from last time, make a donation. So we're going to do half of 3,000. So half times 3,000. So half of 3,000 is 1,500. So we're going to assume 1,500 people made a donation. And on average, that donation was £8.60. So we're going to take these 1,500 people, and they're each making this £8.60 donation. So when they do that, in total, the money that they get is 12,900. You can type that in your calculator and check that. Out of those £12,900, a third of them filled a tax form. So, sorry, out of those 15, not 12,900, out of the 1,500 people, a third of them filled a tax form. So how many people filled a tax form? A third just means you divide it by 3. So that tells me 500 people filled a tax form. Out of those 500 people, the government added, from the £8.60, added 25%. Now that's the same as timesing by 0.25, but because you have a calculator, mine's on top of the answer button, but you should be able to find your percent sign. And you can actually do shift, mine's a shift in my equal sign, yours might be something else, and hit equals again, and it actually works out your percentage. And that tells you they get an extra 1,075. So the total amount the charity gets is all of this plus all of that. And so the charity is going to get 12900 plus 1075, which gives you 13975. So you go step by step, it's 6 marks. So you're getting marks at each step. It's okay if you miss a couple of these. If you're not sure and get in a muddle, just go step by step. If that last point didn't make sense, it's okay. You're trying to get as many of the marks as possible. But if something doesn't quite make sense, don't look at it and go, I don't understand what this means. Literally take the exam question, you see half. Okay, let me work out half. I've got myself a mark. So you're picking up marks as you go. Right. The average donation from the people who filled in the tax form was more than £8.60. How does this affect your answer? Well, if people actually gave more, then my answer is going to be higher, because if they gave more, then the 25% increase will be even greater on a larger amount. Okay. Right, let's take a look at the next question. So what have we got? We've got Lee wants to draw a graph of y equals x. So here is his graph. Oh, that doesn't look right. And why doesn't that look right? Okay, so there's quick. So first of all, we want to go from, let's read what the instructions say, -5 to 5. So if we have a look at his graph, it actually goes from -4 to 4. So you'd say the graph only goes from -4 to 4. And what else? It doesn't look right at all, because what can you see? So let's take some numbers. If x is 2, y is 2. Well, that makes sense because y equals x. But if x is -2, then y should also be -2. So what the graph should have looked like was a straight line like that. So your other bit of criticism, and that should have gone up to 5. So that would have been your ideal line. So your other criticism, you'd say the graph is incorrect, and you could say for all values less than 0. For all x values less than 0, for x is less than 0, you could state which ones were, which ones also didn't make sense. All right, so let's have a look at the next one. 15. Right, so here's where the questions start to get a bit more difficult. Here's where, if you are doing the higher paper, these will be your first few questions on a higher paper. So a company uses this formula to work out the cost of a taxi ride. £4 is a fixed charge. M is the number of miles traveled. B is the charge for booking online. Claire books a taxi online and travels 8 miles. She pays £20 altogether. So let's try have a look. We can now see M, so the number of miles traveled is 8. So we want to replace the M with an 8. And we know what the total cost is. So we can see that the total cost A is 20. Right, so let's think what this formula actually means. It means 4 plus, and then you've got 1.8M. Remember 1.8M, this means 1.8 times by M. So let's plug in what we know. We know that A is 20. We've got 4, and we're going to put this multiplication into a bracket. So 1.8 times 8 plus B, and B is what we're trying to find. So online booking. So what we're going to do is work backwards. So first of all, I do 1.8 times 8 in my calculator, and I get 14.4. So I've got 4 plus 14.4 plus B. And now hopefully you see that makes the question easier. 18.4 plus B. So that means me saying 18.4 plus something gives me 20. So what must that something be? That something must be 20 minus 18.4, and that's going to give me £1.60, and so my answer is £1.60. A different company has a fixed charge of £3. So instead of the 4, they have a £3. It charges 1.9 per mile and has no booking fee. So we're going to use the question above to help us do that bit. So it has a fixed charge of 3. So wherever there was a 4 in the equation above, so we've still got a charge, we're going to call it C this time. I'm just going to call it C equals, it's got a fixed charge of 3 plus 1.9 per mile. And that's that question there. And so you just use the bit above to help you write that formula. Right, so now we've got some set theory. Now, those of you that were there when I did the probability lesson, you know that this sign here means and. So this is and. So think of it this way round as and. So if you were to draw a line across, you get your A. So you've got A and B. You've got a circle has a circumference C and a diameter D, right? So sorry, circumference. So remember, circumference equals pi d. So the value of the constant must be pi. So those are just facts that you need to know. To calculate the circumference, it's either 2 pi r or pi d, which is exactly the same thing. Right, we've got some ratios now to look at. So there are 250 cows on a farm. On the farm, the number of bulls to the number of cows is 1 to 30. How many bulls are there? So we know this 30 matches up to 240. So what we want to say is 30 times what gives us 240. So the calculation we do is 240 divided by 30 gives us 8. So we know to go from 30 to 240, we have to multiply by 8. We multiply one side by 8, we also have to multiply the other side by 8. So 1 times 8 will give us 8. So the number of bulls will be 8. So that's looking at ratios. So there's going to be one either side. So we're going to finish working through this foundation paper today, and we'll do a higher paper tomorrow. And what we'll do is alternate between foundation and higher. All right. So if you assume the 250 cows produce milk for 10 months each year, each cow produces an average of 25 litres of milk per day. Estimate the total milk production in litres of the 240 cows in 1 year. So let's assume, we're just going to assume because we're estimating. So instead of worrying about whether there's 30 days or 31 days in the year, as long as you write your assumptions, you're getting your marks. So I'm going to assume they're 30 days per month. And because we're estimating, we can do that. And it tells us they're producing it for 10 months of the year. So in total, we've got 30 times 10. So now we're going to have 300 days. So you've got 300 days and you're producing 25 litres per cow, and there's 240 of them. So you're timesing that all into your calculator, although if you want to, you could try do it without, and you'd get 1800000. And so that would be your total number of litres, your total milk production. Okay. Question 19. So here is a right angle triangle. Now remember, the minute we see right angle, our brain is going Pythagoras, SOHCAHTOA, Pythagoras, SOHCAHTOA. Those are the only two things we need to think about. In this case, we're looking to find the hypotenuse. So we're going to use a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where the c is my hypotenuse, which I'm trying to find. I'm going to put that in there. X squared, and the other two can be any order. I'm going to plug that into my calculator. So I get 51.84 squared plus 92.1. Sorry, it's not once I square it, it's me squaring. And that equals 144. So I know that x squared equals 144. So x has to be 12. And the way you'd, because that's the square, maybe I missed a step. if I write that step in. Hopefully that makes sense. So you've got a squared plus b squared equals c squared. C squared is always, always your hypotenuse, which is always, always opposite your right angle. Okay. Question 20. Work out the values of a and b in the identity. So what are we going to do here? We're first going to open out the left-hand side. So we're going to look at the left-hand side and open up the brackets. So let's have a look. If we do 5 times 7, we're going to get 35x. 5 times 8 to give us 40. 3 times 2x to give us 6x. 3 times b to give us 3b. All right, and we're saying that's equivalent to ax plus 13. So what they're saying is we're going to first put all the x's together on this side, which I think is easy. You've got 35x and 6x, which you can combine together to give you 41x. And then you've got plus 40 plus 3b. So now you can see, if we try to match things up, we've got lots of x's on this side and 41 lots of x's on this side. So straight away we can say a equals 41. And then we've got 40 plus 3b is equal to this. So we match up the x's and we've put them together and we've got some of the marks and we're done. And then we can match up the other bits. So we've got 40 plus 3b equals 13. And if you remember, the way to do this is you cover up the thing with the unknown. So you're covering up the 3b. So 40 plus something equals 13. Now that must be a minus something. So you're going to do, or you can do it if you've learned it this way, you minus the 40 this side, you minus the 40 this side. So you get 3b equals minus 27. And so b equals minus 9. So you have a equals 41 and you have b equals minus 9. All right, 21. So in total, there are 27 questions in this paper. So this is getting to the more tricky stuff on the foundation paper. So the first 4 terms of the linear sequence are, so the way we do this is we look for the difference first. So how do we go from 7 to 11? Oh God. We add 4, and so on. So we can see we're adding 4. The minute we see we're adding 4, we know it's this. We don't even need to bother to check. If we wanted to check, we could say, well, that's the first one. 1 times 4 is 4, plus 3 is 7. So whatever the difference is, the minute you see the difference, you write that difference and an n. So if the difference is 4, straight away you know it's 4n. All right, question 22. Here is some information about 20 trains leaving a station. And they're giving you some clues as to how you're going to work out the mean by giving you a bit to write the midpoint. Now, do you remember the midpoint of 2 numbers is you add them up and you divide it by 2. So 0 plus 5 is 5, divided by 2 is going to give you 2.5. 5 plus 10 is 15, divided by 2 is going to give you 7.5. 15 plus 10 is 25, divided by 2 is going to give you 12.5. And this is what we would call our x, and this is what we would call our f. And then here, we're going to multiply those 2 columns together. So we're going to do 12 times 2.5 to give us 30. 7 times 7.5 to give us 52.5. 1 times 12.5 to give us 12.5. And because that's 0, I haven't worried about it, and we don't need to worry about a midpoint. Then what I do is I add up my f column. So I add up this column here. So I do 12 plus 7 plus 1, which gives me 20, which it should be 20 because we've got 20 trains. and I add up this column that I've calculated. So I'm doing 30 plus 52.5 plus 12.5, which gives me 95. And so my estimated mean is the two divided by each other. It's 95 divided by 20. And when you plug that into your calculator, you should get 4.75 minutes. And you notice that that should kind of make sense. It's somewhere between 0 and 5, where there's the most number of trains. It makes sense. If you got a number that wasn't between even 0 and 15, you know you've done something wrong. You go back and you check that working. So you're constantly trying to do sense checks whenever you're working through these sorts of exam questions. Okay. The station manager looks at the number in more detail. Let's make this smaller so you can see the whole question. Okay. He works out an estimate of the mean using his information. How does his estimate compare? Well, I would probably very quickly, it's only 1 mark, but to get a sense of what I'm doing, I'd quickly maybe write down some midpoints down the side, because they're quite easy to do here. So we've got 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. If I wanted to, I could even work out accurately, multiply it all up. I've got 12, 12 times 1 is 0, 7 times 5 is 35, 0, 0, 11. What I would expect is that my mean is probably going to be, so before, do you remember, so before we got a mean of 4.75. Do you notice that most of the numbers are like at the top end? But you could just work it out. So you could say, okay, this is out of 20 again. This total here is 58. 58 over 20 is 2.9. And I can see that 2.9 is lower than part A. So in this case, it's actually quite easy to calculate it. But you can also see that a lot of the numbers are at the top of between 0 and 2. So you expect it to be lower. All right. 23. 2 identical quarter circles are cut out from a rectangle. So these are cut out from a rectangle. Okay, and I'm gonna just do this. Put a line through there. Do I know anything else? I'm told they're quarter circles. So if that's 12, then half of it is going to be 6 centimeters. And because that's going to be a radius, that means this is also 6 centimeters. If I'm thinking about the circles. So then the area of the whole rectangle is going to be 12 times 6. So that's going to give me 72 centimeters squared. I know the radius is 6 because that's going to be 6, isn't it? Or if I look along here. So I'm going to got an area of a quarter circle is going to be the same as pi times the radius squared. And because it's a quarter, I'm going to divide it by 4. And then you're going to plug that into your calculator and you get 28.274 centimeters squared. And so what we've got here, the area shaded is the whole rectangle minus 2 of the quarter circles. So we've got 72 minus 2 lots of 28.274, and that gives you 15.5 centimeters squared. Okay. Right. So 24. The diagrams show the position of a tap when off and fully on. The tap is fully on when the angle of turn is 180. Okay. When fully on, water flows out of the tap. So we know that water is flowing out of the tap at 14 litres per minute. The rate at which it flows out is directly proportional to the angle of turn. The tap is turned 135. Water flows into the tank. Will it take less than 7.5 minutes? Show you're working. Right, so it's telling us it's proportional to the angle of turn. So that means if it's turned less than 180, less than that will fall out. So if it's 135 out of 180, so it's not the whole amount open, how much open is it? So now if you put that in your calculator, that comes out to 3/4. So 135, so this is 3/4 open. So instead of being 17 litres per minute coming out, it's going to be 3/4, oh, sorry, not 17, 14. It's going to be 3/4 of 14. So 3/4 of 14 gives you 10.5 litres. So that's how much is going to be coming out every single minute. Okay, and now we've got a tank which needs 79.8 litres. If 10.5 is flowing out every minute, then 79.8 divided by 10.5 will give you the amount of minutes you need to fill that, to use up that 79.8. So 79.8 divided by 10.5 gives you 7.6 minutes, which is more than 7.5 minutes. So your answer will say, no, it will take longer, and your working above would be sufficient. Right. Almost there. So, and bear in mind, you've got longer for the exam. I've gone through this relatively quickly. So you've got a triangle here that's equilateral. So the minute you know it's equilateral, what does that tell you? So having an equilateral triangle tells you all the sides have to be the same. Right. So if the sides are the same, that means this side here is the same as this side, which is the same as this side. So if I make two of the sides equal to each other, I should first be able to find the x. So maybe we'd start off with that. And I can't be bothered with brackets, so I'm going to choose these top two to make the same. I'm going to put all the x's on one side and all the numbers on the other side. So I'm going to move the number first. I'm going to move that 10 onto this side. So I'm going to get 6x equals 4x plus 15. Then I'm going to move the 4x onto this side. So I'm going to get 2x equals 15. So 2 times something is 15. That something must be 7.5. So now I've found out what x is. I can substitute it in and find out what the length of a side is. So I'm going to do in my calculator 6 times 7.5. That's what 6x means, minus 10. And I get 35. And if I had time, I would check. So I do 4 times 7.5 plus 5, and I would double check that's also 35, and double check that's also 35. So then you know you've done it right. Now it's saying, is the perimeter greater than 1 meter? If it's greater than 1 meter, when you add them all up, you should get a number bigger than 100. So you've got 35 plus 35 plus 35, which is 105. Therefore, it is longer than 1 meter. So that would be that question, right? So I think we've got 2 more questions to go, and we've worked through that entire paper. So 26. An approximation for the value of pi is given by some big long thing. use your calculator to show the approximation is within 0.1 of 3.14. So what you have to do is type that all into your calculator and type it exactly as you see it. So you're going to type a 4 in, you're going to open a bracket, 1 minus, you're going to use the fraction button and put 22 over 57, plus the fraction button again, 22 over 85, minus, and so on. So when I type that in, the number that I get in my calculator with all the digits is 3.041839619. And then I want to see, is it within 0.1? So I do 3.14 minus 0.041839619. And in your calculator, you won't retype it. You'll do 3.14 minus, and then you're going to hit the answer button, because this answer will already be saved in your calculator as the answer button. So it'll already be saved in your calculator as the answer button. So you click that in and you'll get 0.098. And is this smaller than 0.1? Yes, it is. Therefore, it's within 0.1. Okay, last question. Now, work out 9.12 times 10 to the 10. Now, it's in your calculator. If you plug it in your calculator, you'll probably get the right answer depending on your calculator. But let's just go through how you do it in steps. So in steps in your calculator, if it doesn't give it to you straight away in standard form, you do 9.12 divided by 3.2, and that gives you 2.85. Then you do 10 to the power of 10 divided by 10 to the power of 4. Now, when you divide indices, it's the same as taking them away. So you've got 10 take away 4. So you'll get 10 to the 6. So your answer will be 2.85 times by 10 to the 6. Okay, so that was an entire higher calculator foundation paper. That's, I know I went through it very quickly. It was from November 2018. It's the AQA paper. You can have a look, and if you go to the YouTube channel, this will be saved. How did you do that again? Okay, sorry, I'm not sure which bit you were not sure of, but if you go back and you can rewatch this on the YouTube channel, and hopefully that's useful. Tomorrow we'll be doing a higher calculator paper, and I'm going to alternate between them, because I think for maths, instead of picking a topic, this is more useful, and hopefully it'll identify for you which topics you're not sure of. Okay. So